These new wheels in this chair are insane. I just started this new character, trying to power level this wizard or sorcerer or whatever they're called in Diablo. I also wanted to have some fun and kind of index on a topic that I stumbled upon on Cringe Mode LinkedIn of all places. I think what's really interesting about the topic is this dude was I don't want to say he was having a crash out, but he was definitely upset about recent violence in the U.S. and talking about firearm regulation and how Taiwan has a ton of regulation and there's like no violent crime or whatever. But it's like my whole thing was like apple to oranges. Like I wanted to scrape some data with y'all on GPT in between kind of some of our Diablo playing and just look up some statistics around kind of incarceration rates in the U.S. versus like Taiwan and other developed countries per capita, just to see like, hey, sure, firearms or not, like what about other violent crimes like assaults and all these other crazy heinous things that occur? I mean, my assumption is the U.S. is a lot lower trust of a society. I think it's an extremely low trust society. And these other countries, these other developed countries are extremely high trust, right? They have like cultural alignment, kind of really deep understanding and kind of unspoken expectations across their population, their cities, their villages, whatever, their places. Villages as if it's like some type of RPG or something. No, but in the U.S., it's just kind of we're completely decentralized. We've always been like that, right? And we rely on like really honest law enforcement. We've had like kind of really kind of pro firearm laws just to be able to create that level of agency and leverage for the everyday law abiding citizen to say, hey, even if I can't rely on law enforcement, I could at least in the worst case situation protect myself and my loved ones. I think you can't have both, right? You can't do kind of what we've seen, I'd say in the last 20 or 30 years, where it's like you have a low trust society, almost very little like judicial impact, very, law enforcement numbers that are dwindling. I know here there's like 100 or 150 vacancies, which is massive for the small city I live in. You can't have a low trust society, almost no kind of law enforcement pressure or protection, and then regulate firearms for people. That doesn't make sense, right? That's a recipe for self-destruction. And so you kind of need balance. If you have a high trust society, then you could regulate the crap out of everything, right? Because you're not even really protecting your own population from itself at that point. You're protecting other people from coming in and exploiting regulations and then creating harm if you have a high trust society. But really, it's a balancing act, right? You need high trust. You can have high trust, and then that can enable a form of regulation. Or if you are low trust, you have to have some loose regulation so people can protect themselves, because given the governance I think society's experience, they're never going to be like, all right, give it all up. I'll just rely on these law enforcement officers. I can't really do anything. Or just like, the kind of lack of fear incentive provided by this judicial environment where it's like, no one's held accountable. You just can't have that for a functioning society. This is pure logic, right? This is unpopular complexity right here. But first off, let me actually, I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to say, in the U.S., how many, what percentage of the population will end up in jail at some point? So what we're trying to do here is just figure out kind of like characteristically how are we a violent population? Are we kind of a population that's predisposed to violence? Mostly risk assessments focus on prison, state, or federal. Based on the Bureau of Justice Statistics lifetime risk calculations, an estimated of 1 in 20 Americans, 5%, will serve time in state or federal prison at some point in their lifetime, assuming incarceration patterns remain similar to recent years. And if anything, like I don't think it's getting better. I don't think people are becoming less violent, less criminal, less empathetic or compassionate with other people in society. I think if anything, especially here in the U.S., people are becoming more polarized and drifting apart and like respecting each other less. Also, kind of, I think social media and some of these different platforms that we have available to us and video games and just things are just like, I don't want to say desensitizing, but they're kind of just they're just distracting us, right? They're distracting us from like human to human empathetic connection and like being able to align on certain things and realize like if I do this and it affects a person this way, negatively, et cetera, or even positively, I am going to react and feel this type of way. It's hard, I think, for just based on our population, for most people to really, really care and do that. I mean, even driving on the road, like go on a major highway in your state if you're in the U.S. or in your city and see how people drive around each other. Like it's insane. There's all these crazy accidents because people are trying to save 20 seconds on their commute. I mean, it's nuts. Like it's just all. I'd be interested in scraping all of this data because I think post COVID it's just gotten pretty gnarly. So that's 5%, 1 in 20. It's a pretty big number, 5% of the entire population. And as you know, like our our current judicial landscape, you're not gonna land in prison for a petty crime or something low hanging, right? These are all like pretty serious offenses. Now let's, for fun, just do Japan because I think it's so extreme. So, oh shoot, it like copied the whole thing. So let's just change this to totally overcomplicating this. In Japan, what percentage of the population will end up in jail at some point? Comparing this to the details you provided above. Let's see what we got going on here. Japan is one of the lowest incarceration rates among developed countries, with 33 people in prison per 100,000 population as of late 2024. Whoa, don't need that. For comparison, the U.S. incarceration rate historically has been over 500 per 100,000 people, prisons and jails combined. Interesting. Okay. That's insane because our incarceration rate is so low, 0.0034% compared to 5%. I mean, that's an insane comparison. And something else that I've realized, people in the state, so that's a really low percentage, just blow for blow, right? There's a lot fewer of the population is incarcerated in Japan. A lot more of the population is incarcerated in the U.S. And honestly, my assumption is that in the U.S., just by scraping and reviewing the news and kind of being a human that exists in society here, the actual crimes that people are being incarcerated for in the U.S. are a lot more severe and serious compared to the ones that are being incarcerated for Japan. So even though they are such a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent lower than the U.S., 0.034% versus 5%. In addition to that, I think this 0.034% is made up of much like less serious crimes against other people, right? Where, it's like, well, what is a serious crime? If you do something that can cause a lifelong injury to someone or whatever, some type of violent crime that like physically impacts someone for the rest of their life, versus like taking advantage of, let's say petty theft or shoplifting or something like that. I mean, those are crimes, right? They're not good, but you're not taking like you're not taking experience, like projected future experience away from other people because you hurt them, right? I think those two crimes are a lot different. And I think a lot of our 5% that are in prison commit gnarly crimes compared to the crimes that are people are being imprisoned for in Japan. That's just an assumption. I have an assumption that the crimes being committed in Japan are less violent or less consequential. How do I spell consequential? Than the crimes that land people in prison in the U.S. Is this accurate? What do you think? You don't have to placate me. I'm scraping data and doing analysis with my YouTube friends, with my friends. Your assumption has some grounding in data, but the full story is nuanced. Here's a grounded, evidence-based comparison of the severity and types of crime in Japan versus the United States and how it relates to incarceration patterns. Japan has much lower rates of violent crime across multiple international crime measures. Homicide rates in Japan are far lower than in the U.S., often an order of magnitude less. For example, statistics show Japan's murder rate is around 0.3 to 0.4 per 100,000 people, while in the U.S. it's closer to 4 to 5 per 100,000. That's insane. That's roughly 10 to 13x lower in Japan. Other crimes like this gun-related violence per capita. These differences reflect actual incidents differences, not just reporting or punishment. In other words, serious violent crimes that drive incarceration in the U.S. happen much less frequently in Japan. Total crime patterns differ. Japan's overall crime rate is generally lower than the U.S., though how total crime is tallied can vary by source and definition. Some violent crimes, like bicycle theft, can show up more in Japanese stats simply because fewer violent crimes make up the totals. So it's not that that low crime is only about less violence, but that many serious categories, especially involving interpersonal harm, are much less common. So that's huge. Japan has a high conviction rate, 99% of prosecuted cases. Doesn't mean harsher trials. It reflects that prosecutors only bring forward cases with strong evidence. Many arrests are never lead to indictment. In contrast, the U.S. has a broader spectrum of cases going to trial or plea bargains. Interesting. Focus on social order and alternatives. Japan uses suspended sentences, probation, rehabilitation more liberally for less serious offenses. We try to do this, but we do this for, we're always like the upside down, right? It's like Stranger Things. Like the U.S. is the upside down. We do this for very serious crimes. So we have like fun little like cute things that we do for people that like commit like super heinous crimes and have patterns of like, recommitting these crimes and getting more serious and potentially like mental health issues. And it's nuts, right? We do this kind of alternative punishment or enrichment or whatever for like legitimate dangerous individuals that can hurt people and change their lives forever. And that's a risk our judicial system takes on behalf of the population, right? So that's like a really, really, really bad transaction. But I want to focus on one thing that's really interesting. So this statement right here. So it's not that low crime is only about less violence, but that many serious categories, especially involving interpersonal harm, are much less common. So it's like, not only is the percentage so much lower, right? 0.034%, whatever, compared to 5% or 1 out of 20, but this actual percentage includes incarcerations for like less serious, less real crimes. I mean, so the multiplier is just compounding. It's insane. So going back to the original, like, cringe mode crash out on LinkedIn, the argument was like, why does the U.S. like allow for, why do they have such like relaxed gun laws and stuff? It's like, because we don't have another option, kind of, right? Like our law enforcement departments are greatly reduced in presence and ability to enforce the law. We don't have, from an automation perspective, it's hard to get policy in there, and rightfully so. People don't want some crazy police state with a bunch of drones flying around all day. But I think it's going to get to the point where people would trade that for, like, recently here in my city, a lady just got attacked at the park. She was running her kind of casual jogging circle or whatever, and someone threw acid on her, right? So at some point, everyone's scared, everyone's freaked out, no one thinks like the department here is going to be able to wrangle this in because of like their lower officer numbers and like their the kind of instrumentation of the city from an automation and sensor perspective is low. So it's like they don't have the perpetrator yet. We have like a crazy homeless crisis too, where, I mean, a lot of these individuals, it's just hard to kind of track people that kind of live that lifestyle, and B, expect that they're going to align to societal norms, right? A lot of people have like mental health conditions. It's just crazy to be in this situation. It's not unique to my city. I think this is like every city in the U.S. And America's competitors like quietly are giggling, right? Like this is just like complete dysfunction. So going back to that article where it's like, and this is like the cherry on the top, right? It's like, you're living in the pits of hell, but guess what? We're going to advocate for taking away your only lever to kind of stay above the water, right? And to not completely perish. So you'll be completely vulnerable, have no agency. And I think that's what frustrates people. I think when there's so many compounding double negatives, they're just like, we have a low trust society. We're not going to enforce the law effectively. We're going to create a climate where law enforcement isn't like a desirable career pathway. So we're not going to be able to replenish any retirements, and we're going to have a lower personnel count to enforce the law. And the people who are enforcing the law can't really do it because they're hamstrung. We're going to make a judicial climate that incentivizes perpetrators to commit crimes because they're just kind of not really enforced, or there's like these like Japanese style enrichment programs instead of like, holding someone accountable for doing something egregious. And then, it's just like cascading double negatives where it's just like, this will not create a productive society. And so, when I think, because, I have a geopolitical background and stuff, and kind of I'm involved in a bunch of random things for work and technology wise, zooming out, like looking at the spectrum and seeing kind of some of America's global competitors, how couldn't you be laughing? How couldn't you be like smirking and saying, hey, if this was a Magic the Gathering game and I'm running a mono blue deck and I'm like totally locking down my opponent and countering everything they're doing and making them kind of just defeat themselves, how could you not have that perspective, right? And so, I don't know. I hopped in the LinkedIn thread and I just cited some quotes and data snippets and stuff, and I essentially, like, my whole position was like, you can't have double negatives. You can't have low trust, or low. I guess the inverse, right? It's like you can't have low trust and high regulation for firearms, and when you have a low trust society, people don't have access to a lever to protect themselves in the worst case scenario, right? It just won't work, right? And I don't think it benefits anyone other than the competitors of the country that's trying to be functional, because there's too many other foundational components to getting this high trust, to making America more of a high trust society. And it's going to take repetitions. It's going to take like cultural adaptations. It's going to take some really powerful movements to make that a reality. And it's not happening this year. It's not happening in 5 years. It's going to take time. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspectives, there will not be a progression towards any type of firearm regulation at scale anytime soon. And the numbers that we're talking about here are some of the things that make that a reality. So now, back to cloud service. my sorcerer that I just created. Oh shoot, it's all the way out there. All right, let's go hit up a cool dungeon. Maybe I'll do this one. See what's up here. But yeah, I mean, it's a complicated thing, but I don't know. Realistically, it's complicated, but not complicated. I think if you overcomplicate it to avoid doing anything, that's kind of a recipe we see quite often. But if you simplify the logic and perspective of people wanting to live in a safe environment and have certain expectations, then I think everything becomes a lot more clear, and then you can kind of unpack the complexity that we're all waiting for, and we're all eager to decompose so we can solve problems. I mean, ultimately, it's funny, like the name of this channel, Unpopular Complexity, it's like everything's complex, right? At the root of everything, I'm going to crack one of these potions so I get some cool increased crit strike damage chance and some experience. The reality is, like, everything is every problem that you actually have to solve is complex in some way, shape, or form. And so, but a lot of times you have to simplify the pathway or simplify the kind of aligning or kind of identifying of problems in order to be able to solve it, in order to deal with the complex data. It's like a multi-layered thing. Probably sound like a psychopath right now, but I also just kind of, not respect, but like got some new gear. Ooh, almost lost that one. Classic move there. If you watch my last video, I just get like absolutely wrecked by these passives. I'm not like a pro gamer, by the way. I'm actually garbage. I used to be like pretty hardcore into World of Warcraft. That was fun. Here, just really quick overview. So I just kind of redid some of my gear. I'm like all in on this electric build, this lightning build. Level 47. It's been like a day or two. So I've been power leveling this guy, kind of doing some holiday fun here. But yeah, I used to be pretty gangster with World of Warcraft. I had like guilds. I was a total nerd. Had like a role-playing guild and stuff. It was rough. And I was young when I started. Even before that, I always joke around and say like EverQuest kind of raised me, because it did. But what's with these like? I will totally help you get out of here. Let's go. Let's roll. Let's roll. I think one of the things I really enjoy about Diablo is like it's so low. It's kind of so low threat. Like I can just, like I'm about to kick off a pretty massive project in I'd say an hour or two, and do some hardcore engineering before I watch the Jaguars just absolutely dominate the Broncos, dominate the Denver Broncos. Huge Jags fan. But what's cool about like this game is like it's so low threat. Granted, I'm not like at Nightmares yet. I'm kind of coasting into max level and stuff and just having fun. But it's great. It's just like, you could, it's like it's kind of like the fidget spinner of video games. It's like if you just want to chill and just mash buttons and kind of pretend like you're in control of your character in the game and stuff, it's really forgiving. But yeah, I love the whole crime topic. So interesting. Like I think one of the crazy components of society is that like, I think we've had the convenience, like things weren't bad enough, right? In the US, I think we've had the convenience of kind of just dealing with some of the chaos and thinking it was just kind of normal, even though it's not. And I think when things get like bad enough, right, where like there's, sweet ladies running around doing their routine workout and having like random acid attacks, where they're like doused in acid and they'll like never look the same. Thank goodness I don't think it affected her eyesight, but it very well could have, right? Like I think that's when, and that's just like one instance. You see it everywhere. You see a bunch of chaos all over our country, and like people are just. That's when things get a little bit tighter, expectations get higher. The worst thing that can happen is like the lack of self-awareness and just like a failed governance structure, right? I always argue, I'm like, whatever leadership core we've had that like got the U.S. to where it is today over the last 40 years, like they're not going to be able to solve these problems at scale. So it's like, what do the new leaders look like? What does the new kind of movement look like? It's really interesting and it's fun to reflect on. But one of those things is like, you can't just, it's a lever, right? I mean, it's an option, but one of the things is like, hey, we need to increase taxes. We need to increase taxes, to be able to pay law enforcement officers to be able to enforce the law more effectively and prevent these situations from happening. I mean, we all know that's kind of the direction it's going to end up going because we solve all our problems with more money, even if we don't solve them foundationally at the symptom level, right? And so that's one of my fears is like we're gonna have this like kind of tone deaf approach to the crime that's just kind of spiraling by just like charging more for a system that's just like unperformant, right? Like I mentioned it earlier, you have law enforcement officers that can enforce the law, not, I mean, for a variety of reasons, but one of the big reasons is, just regulation. Over the last like 10 years, whatever, it's gotten super gnarly, and I think that's why a lot of other more than pay, because I think we're going to have a lot of people that are out of the workforce that need to come back into the workforce, and I think they'd be grateful to be law enforcement officers if they were supported and had the levers to be able to enforce the law. I think the thing they're afraid of is like getting in trouble themselves, right? Where like the criminals, the people that are kind of not conforming to societal norms and being like good stewards of a modern culture, have more rights than the law enforcement officers. Like I think that's the thing that would like prevent people from wanting to go down that path. But with AI taking jobs and like kind of all of society laughing and being in on the joke of like fake work doesn't matter anymore, like all this like fake enterprise garbage that like doesn't mean anything, it's all just been just placating shallow requests and like min-maxing a bunch of garbage. Like what's efficiency mean? Oh shoot, my game's tripping out. Oh, I'm back, I guess. Cool. If I was on like any harder difficulty, I'd be toast. Yeah, it's rough. I think in order to get more people in the door for law enforcement recruiting, we really these cities need to rethink how they enforce the law and like stop gaslighting and playing games with people. They need to actually do something spectacular, and it should be uplifting, right? Like, who wants to be the loser in the movie, right? Everyone thinks they're the main character, right? We're just like a very kind of self-centered society, which I can relate to. Like, I get it. Like, I want to be useful. I want to be get back here. Like, I want to be like, I want people to rely on me for things. Like, I think it's cool to be like, a valuable member of society, a valuable member of your community and stuff. Like, but just think about like actually solving some of these problems, right? Whether it's like, coming up with a more performant way to address the homeless crisis. If it's reducing crime and making, law enforcement empowered, maybe they used to be, but under a different guise, under maybe more regulation, maybe there's a balance to it. It doesn't have to be so extreme. It doesn't have to be, this like insidious version of law enforcement that people paint these pictures of, but maybe it's like a more trackable, traceable law enforcement. But guess what? They can like actually do gnarly stuff. If people are being gnarly, they can do some gnarly stuff because the rest of society wants them to, right? And so, I mean, those are just some things. I think the homeless crisis is like, I could have like an entire other video on that. It's just gotten out of control. I think we're close to 1 million reported or registered, whatever, logged homeless people, or what's the politically correct term? Unhomed people or something. It's like so crazy, so brain rotty. But let me see. I don't have it. Oh, I do have it. Cool. But yeah, so I think like that crisis is like kind of insane, right? It's just like super intense just to have individuals that completely don't conform to societal norms and don't recognize the rule of law kind of interfering and existing with other people. I just watched a video where some guy just kind of absolutely mentally ill, but also known for having issues. Like the law enforcement officers were laughing about how this person was known for like punching people in the face on 3rd Street or something. And this time he didn't punch someone in the face. Like a lady was waiting to cross the street and he came up with like a stick with nails in it, like a hard wooden, 2x4 or like 1x4 something. And it had nails in it, and just like as hard as he could hit her on the side of the head. The nail ended up going into her eye, and she lost her eyesight forever, and she's still in the hospital, so she has to pay for that financially probably, or maybe the city's going to get sued or something. But who enabled that situation? The city, with their lack of enforcement and their inability to kind of project the rule of law on the population, and these like NGOs that like turn homeless people into assets, where they're like giving them needles, they're kind of, giving them all these different resources, not expecting anything from them, but charging like the government for it. Who knows what the multiplier is on like providing all of these services? So you pay for it with your taxes. With your taxes, you pay for a homeless person to wander around with a stick that was just fed by, you know, a 5x cost of whatever materials these NGOs gave them to be fed. They also gave them whatever narcotics, or not narcotics themselves, but gave them the needles and the mechanisms to use narcotics. The community has funded the Narcan that kind of keeps bringing them back, and then in between bouts of consciousness, this person decides to walk to a cross section, and you know, they had a flicker of life in their brains, and decided to use that flicker of light to take a nail bat and hit an old woman in the head with it, right? All of that was funded by you, which is insane. And so like a society like that just isn't serious. It's not real. It's not like interesting or empathetic. It's just completely dysfunctional and almost manufactured to fail. And so I think, you know, as a collective, Drunk Moose, that's a sick name. I like that pet. That's really cute. Everyone has them but me. Damn. Must be like an expansion thing. I didn't get the expansion yet. I just kind of got back into Diablo. I gotta spend this point. But, you know, last thought here is like, I think as, you know, as a society, I think people are just going to start to expect more. You know, there's going to be a lot of people that are out of knowledge work jobs, and people are going to potentially go back to law enforcement or transition careers and do something in a more inspired way. I think our viewpoints as a society needs to change, right? We need to start being more vocal, being more honest, being more authentic, legitimately, right? Not just as like cheap words or slogans or Instagram reels, but as like pillars of society and pillars of governance. Everything from like enterprise governance and how you interact with employees and create expectations for them, all the way to state and city governance, and what you impose on, expectations you impose on like the different departments you're responsible for, and how you enable their success and do what you're, you know, elected to do. And this whole era of like this kind of Gotham shill politician, crony loser, I think it's just uninspiring, right? Like, how much more money do you really need? How much more influence and shit do you really need? It's just not impressive. I think a lot of future leaders are going to look to be more impressive. They're going to look to be the marks in society that people like smile when they think of, right? It's not going to be this last 60-year kind of like, ooh, that person's like really yucky. They remind me of a Gotham villain. Like, I can't relate to them. They've done nothing for like the people around them or the responsibilities that they were supposed to uphold, right? And the law and order that they were supposed to create in their city. That's all gone. You know, I mean, it's not gone. It's flickering. It's on fumes. It's just cringe now, right? Because it's so obvious. I think people have just been exposed to it for too long, and things are getting bad enough that they're like willing to speak out and willing to be honest and observant. But yeah, I think in order to solve these big problems, you know, we need to simplify the organization of them and kind of talking through what's creating them. And then obviously the underlying levers in order to solve them are extremely complex. And those are the things that we need to address diligently. I can't be more excited. I think we're on a good pathway. All right, y'all. Have a great day. Later.